gainers here. And look at that, you have Pure Gold still maintaining its lead among index players here. Yesterday, it climbed as much as 7 and 6 tenths of 8%, outpacing the PSEI's gain here. Still today's top gainer so far as we open Thursday's trade. Today, just announced a share buyback transaction worth 7.16 million pesos for a total of 200,000 shares. Again, Pure Gold now valued at 36 pesos and 90 centavos a share. You have a number of players as well here making gains of over 2%, the likes of Aboitiz and Mega World. Other notable players here, however, on the downside here, you have RRHI, the day's worst performer so far. Yesterday, they were able to climb as much as 3 and 4 tenths of 8%, extending their rally for 5 days. But let's see if that is going to be put to a stop today. As you can see, RRHI in the negative territory so far. Also, you have a number of players that we should be keeping an eye on. You have SM Investments. They have been raised to hold at May Bank. So let's see how SM will be performing for the rest of the day. But for now, let's have a closer look at one specific stock. That's going to be Dito. That's after it has chosen Nokia for a 5G supply deal. That's for a supply of AirScale products, including MIMO solutions. So RAN network will be established across Mindanao. This is meant to help Dito reach its goal of building a 5G network across the country. Nokia has been their 4G LTO radio partner since 2020. Dito so far starting the day with in the green here, up 2 and 6 tenths of 8%, and now at 9 pesos and 73 centavos a share. And lastly, let's see how our airlines are doing. This as tourism stakeholders want streamlined and standardized travel guidelines for fully vaccinated travelers. That includes the possibility of incentivizing them. You have Air Carriers Association of the Philippines supporting the Transportation Department's push for green lanes for fully vaccinated individuals. You also have flag carrier Philippine Airlines looking forward to accepting more travelers from the U.S. and other countries once arrival protocols have been put in place. So far, Philippine Airlines, as you can see here, starting the day at 5 pesos and 50 a share, not much of a movement there. However, you have here Cebu Pacific somehow on the upside here at 43 pesos and 90 a share. A regional laggard, that's how Moody's Analytics is depicting the Philippines as they see the country unlikely hitting growth target of 6 to 7% this year. They only see 5.3% growth, a full percent lower than their previous estimate. To understand more what's behind the bleaker prospect, we have their chief economist for Asia Pacific, Stephen Cochrane. Good afternoon, Stephen. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
Okay, so lots of our neighbors on track or even back at pre-pandemic output levels. Why is the Philippines not growing as fast as its neighbors?
Well, there's a number of factors that are leading to this situation. Of course, one, I think the most important is that the quarantines in the Philippines have been very long and very strict. And so they've really led to a long shutdown of parts of the economy. And when you have these quarantines last as long as they have, there's going to be a number of businesses, particularly small businesses, that just can't survive. And so there will be a number of businesses that won't be there to help the economy grow when things finally open up. Leading to that, I think, too, has been the fact that fiscal policy from the government spending has been less than what we've seen in other countries around Southeast Asia. And that would have helped in terms of providing some support, providing some floor under many businesses that maybe can't make it. And also helping the unemployed just with day-to-day spending so that they don't have to draw down on their savings. Another reason is that the rollout of vaccines has been very slow, and so it's going to take a while to get vaccines out there broadly enough to be able to be confident in opening up the economy again and getting away from the quarantines. And I think finally, one point is that when you look at the broader Asian economy, of course, one of the strengths of Asia is that it's very, very closely tied into the global export economy, which has been really strong. The goods producing side of the global economy came back very quickly, and that has helped the Asian economy. The Philippines, though, is less linked to the global economy through exports, and export growth has been very minimal compared to some of the very strong surges from other countries in Southeast Asia.
Okay, Stephen, I want to first touch on one point you did mention: the country having the longest and strictest lockdowns, especially in the region. Well, cases have been at least receding from that recent surge that we saw in March. Should we take this as a positive sign that the country can at least afford to ease restrictions now for the capital and nearby areas?
Well, I think it must be the question that everybody's asking right now, right? It's been so long around the capital region with the quarantines. The peak was back in early April at about 15,000 cases a day in the Philippines. I was just looking this morning at the Johns Hopkins website. They showed, you mentioned 8,000. I saw about 4,000 cases was the last date, a figure on the 25th of May. But that's still, I mean, it's still about where it was over the last 6 months or so. You know, in the Philippines, once cases went up, it hasn't really gone in waves. It's stayed fairly high. Now it peaked at 15,000. Back, it's anywhere between 4,000 and 8,000 cases a day. That's still fairly high. My guess is it's going to have to come down below that before authorities will allow the quarantines to really be lifted. I wouldn't be surprised quarantines stay in place for at least the next 2 weeks, and then we'll see what happens longer.
And how does that spark confidence? I mean, the government coming up with quarantine classifications every 2 weeks.
It's hard. It's hard to live with that, and it's not just the Philippines that faces that. You know, we've seen additional quarantine-like measures now in Thailand and in Malaysia and Singapore, even up in Taiwan, which was perhaps the most successful country in the world in controlling COVID. And it has to be a little discouraging when the conditions change, when you have to go back into a more strict lockdown. Then you get some relief from that, and you go back. It's very difficult to plan. If you're a business person, it's particularly difficult to plan. And just planning for your family, planning to get your kids to school, that can be very, very difficult, and leads to a mindset that is not the most optimistic, say.
Okay. Now, earlier also you touched on this point about the need for more government spending here. We have another round of stimulus via Biennium 3 in the offing. That's to the tune of 401 billion pesos. But that has yet to get ample support from the Senate and even from the president. Just how necessary is this? How much of a boost is this going to provide?
You know, I think it would be very beneficial if there was another round of fiscal stimulus. I know that these proposals have had a tough time getting through Congress, but other countries in the region, and I would provide examples in Singapore and Malaysia, which have been very active in providing fiscal policy support, have been able to keep their economies running even when they've had to reintroduce some quarantine measures. I think it's very, very important in terms of keeping a floor under the economy so that once things do open up, that businesses and households have a capability of spending, have a capability of investing, and can very quickly get back on with either business or with life.
Now, you did mention as well high mobility curves coupled with slow vaccine progress. That, in a way, is of course going to dampen household consumption. Where do we look now for growth?
Yeah, the vaccine, at this point, the vaccines in the Philippines and around the region are really critical. So many countries have been slow in getting the vaccines out, and we really can't count on the economy opening up completely. You mentioned earlier in the show the opening up of airlines, travel with the U.S. in particular. You know, because there's still a lot of uncertainty with COVID in the region. It may be very slow to open up travel with other Asian countries. But I think initially one of the drivers just will be personal consumption, household consumption. I'm sure that that has been very, very slow. The numbers are indicative of that. And when households are able to go simply get back out, back to shopping malls, to be able to get families out and go to entertainment venues, that will add a very quick surge to the economy. I think another piece of a turnaround will be the government getting completely reinvested again, if you will, in infrastructure projects. Before COVID, there was a lot of spending on infrastructure projects around the country, a very important component of economic development. And the quicker those can get online and get online very fast and in an uninterrupted way, that will actually add a lot to the economy in terms of jobs and a multiplier effect.
Okay. Now, the economy, of course, still contracted in the first quarter. Should we expect a sequential downturn still in the second quarter, or will low base effect somehow cushion the blow?
Well, if you're looking on a quarter-to-quarter basis, my guess, the second quarter might be flat. It could be down a little bit as well. The numbers are not looking particularly good. I think if we're looking for a turnaround in terms of comparing one quarter to the next, the third quarter and the fourth quarter will look better. And so from that measure of recovery, I think the recovery begins in the second half of this year. This assumes that vaccines are rolled out and the quarantines can be lifted. Another way of looking or defining recovery is when the economy gets back to the level of where it was prior to COVID. If we use GDP, gross domestic product, as the measure, that's going to be much longer because the downturn was so deep last year and then even through the first quarter of this year that we know with the data that was recently released. So given that the Philippines has a pretty deep hole to come out of, deeper than almost every other country in Asia, that it will likely be the end of next year before the size of the economy gets back to where it was prior to COVID.
Okay, so a return to previous output levels might happen by the end of 2022. Somehow, election year is happening next year. Do you see that somehow at least providing a bit of a lift for the economy? Or is it going to be a different scenario now?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Historically, one would have to say yes. That usually about a year ahead of elections in the past, there's always a bit of extra spending for a couple of reasons. Sometimes reasons just trying to quickly wrap up existing projects, infrastructure projects, construction, get those done before the elections, and of course spending by all the different by the parties in terms of the cost of campaigning. It could be a little less this year if campaign activities are limited. That remains to be seen whether that will happen or not. But one might expect that there might be some limitation on the size of crowds that can be pulled together for campaign. Mean that there is on the other hand, a greater emphasis for additional spending just to make sure that the economy is growing leading up to the election, creating some positive impact.
But then again, like what you mentioned, a pretty deep hole to get out of for the Philippines. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Moody's Analytics Chief Economist for Asia Pacific, Stephen Cochrane. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The House of Representatives has moved a step closer to approving proposed amendments to certain economic provisions in the 1987 Constitution. The lower house approved last night on second reading a joint resolution that empowers Congress to relax the constitutional limitations on foreign investments in the country. Specifically, the resolution adds the phrase, unless otherwise provided by law, in provisions that give Filipino citizens exclusive rights to own or control natural resources, public utilities, educational institutions, mass media, and advertising companies in the country. In effect, it will open up these sectors to foreign participation. The House may approve the proposal on third and final reading next week, the last week of session before Congress adjourns on June 5. Albay 2nd District Representative and principal sponsor Joey Salceda again allayed fears over the constitutional amendment, saying the resolution is pure economic reform geared towards boosting economic growth. He said lawmakers know and understand that any political charter change will be, quote, dead on arrival. The Philippine government's adherence to its fiscal targets over the last decade has been named as among the best across 64 emerging markets. In Oxford Economics' latest Fiscal Reputation Index, the country posted a score of 5.2 in the past 10 years. This makes it the sixth best performer among 28 select emerging economies. Among frontier markets, the Philippines placed 16th out of 64. The country also saw its score improve to 4.9 in 2020 from the 7.6 out recorded last year. The scores were based on the degree which governments met fiscal targets measured on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the lowest. Overall, the think tank said emerging markets posted a decent record of sticking to their fiscal targets in the past decade. Russia, Serbia, Croatia, Poland, and Hungary recorded the best fiscal reputation, while Egypt, Uruguay, South Africa, Turkey, and the UAE were the bottom five. And that's the first look into the business day this Thursday, May 27, 2021. Catch Business World Live for the market close at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Jess De Los Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.